The road disappears long before the fear truly begins. It thins into gravel, then into dirt, and finally into something that barely deserves to be called a path at all. Trees lean inward as if conspiring, their branches clawing at the sky, swallowing light, swallowing sound. Remote cabins promise escape, solitude, healing. They whisper of peace and quiet to the exhausted soul. But sometimes, far from the noise of the world, you hear things you were never meant to hear. Sometimes, the silence listens back. These are not stories of cheap screams or imagined monsters. These are true chilling remote cabin horror stories, born in isolation, shaped by darkness, and etched into memory by fear. And within that fear live lessons hard-earned, unforgettable truths about survival, courage, awareness, and the fragile strength of the human spirit. The first story begins deep in the northern wilderness, where winter stretches endlessly and human presence feels like an accident rather than a right. A man named Caleb rented a remote cabin tucked miles away from the nearest road, seeking distance from burnout, grief, and the relentless pressure of modern life. He wanted silence. He wanted to disappear for a while. The cabin was old, built of thick logs, with a single chimney and windows that looked out into endless trees. On the first night, the quiet felt comforting, like a blanket. The crackle of the fire and the groan of the wood, settling, were the only sounds. He slept deeply, believing he'd found exactly what he needed. The second night felt different. The quiet wasn't soothing anymore. It pressed in heavy and thick, making his thoughts louder. Every small sound echoed his breathing, the scrape of his boots against the floor, the ticking of his watch. Sometime after midnight, he woke suddenly, heart racing for no clear reason. He lay still, listening. Nothing. Absolute silence. Too much silence. He convinced himself it was nerves, the adjustment to isolation. He went back to sleep. The third morning, he opened the cabin door and felt his stomach drop. Footprints circled the cabin in the fresh snow. Large, deliberate footprints. Not anima, human. They looped around the walls, paused beneath the windows, stopped just short of the door. They never approached fully. They never left a clear pathway. They were simply there, as if someone had walked slow circles through the night, studying the cabin, studying him. Caleb told himself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe another hiker, maybe a hunter, but no vehicles had passed. No other cabin stood nearby. The isolation he'd craved now felt like a trap. That night, the wind rose, rattling the walls. Shadows danced across the ceiling. Around midnight, he heard it a knock. Soft, slow, intentional. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. His body locked in place, fear flooding his chest so fast it stole his breath. Whoever knocked didn't call out, didn't ask for help. They just waited. Minutes stretched into hours. The knock never came again. When morning arrived, the footprints were gone, erased by drifting snow. No signs. No proof. Later, locals told him stories of a trapper who vanished decades earlier, known for wandering during storms, knocking on cabins long after he should have been dead. Caleb left that same day. But the real horror stayed with him. Alone, stripped of distraction, he was forced to confront how thin the line between control and panic really is. Isolation doesn't invent fear. It exposes it. It shows you who you are when there's no one else to reassure you, no noise to drown out your thoughts. And in that exposure, there is a lesson: know yourself, because fear will find you when the world goes quiet. The second story takes place in a snowbound forest in Sweden, where a woman named Elin rented a remote cabin to finish writing a book. She welcomed the isolation, believing it would sharpen her focus. During the day, the forest felt alive, beautiful, almost protective. At night, it changed. Sounds carried strangely through the trees. Footsteps echoed where no paths existed. Branches snapped in patterns that felt deliberate. She told herself it was wildlife. She told herself fear was irrational. But one night, as she paced the cabin, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. When she stopped walking, the sounds outside stopped too. Her instincts screamed. Something was listening. Something was aware. Instead of dismissing the feeling, she trusted it. She turned off the lights, barricaded the door, and stayed awake until dawn. Heart pounding, senses razor sharp. In the morning, police arrived after her emergency radio call. they found evidence of someone camping nearby. An escaped patient from a remote facility had been hiding in the forest, watching cabins, waiting for opportunity. Awareness saved her life. Fear sharpened her instincts, but only because she listened. The lesson was carved deep into her memory. Awareness isn't paranoia, it's survival. Ignoring fear doesn't make you brave, understanding it does. The third story belongs to a set of brothers who inherited a cabin high in the Appalachian Mountains. They planned a quiet weekend together, reconnecting away from the world. The first day passed peacefully. The second night, something shifted. Without warning, every sound in the forest stopped. No insects, no wind, no rustling leaves, just silence, so complete it felt unnatural, oppressive. Then came the breathing. Heavy, slow, circling the cabin walls, stopping near windows, lingering just out of sight. They never saw anything. They didn't need to. The silence itself was the warning. They huddled together, lights on, backs against the wall, holding on to one another until dawn broke the spell. Nothing attacked, nothing entered. But they left, changed. Silence can be louder than screams. Sometimes, the absence of sound is nature's way of telling you to pay attention, to prepare, to survive. Another story unfolds in the frozen expanse of the Yukon, where a solo hiker sought shelter in an abandoned cabin during a sudden storm. Exhausted and freezing, he believed the cabin had saved him. That belief shattered when something climbed onto the roof during the night. Heavy footsteps paced back and forth, slow and deliberate. Fear urged him to hide, to curl into himself and wait. But courage whispered something else. Stay awake, keep the fire burning, make your presence known. He fed the flames, banged metal against wood, refused to become prey. By morning, the footsteps were gone. Courage didn't erase fear. It gave him movement when fear tried to freeze him. Courage is not bravery without fear. It's action taken while fear screams. In Alaska, a missionary family stayed in a remote cabin while traveling between villages. Each night, unseen hands rattled the door, testing the locks, pushing gently but persistently. Instead of panicking, they prayed together, voices steady faith anchoring them to one another. The disturbances stopped as suddenly as they began. Whether the threat was human, psychological, or something else entirely, faith gave them unity when fear could have torn them apart. Darkness tests belief. Sometimes faith isn't about answers, it's about standing together when there are none. Another true account comes from a man vacationing alone in a remote Romanian forest. He dismissed preparation as unnecessary. No emergency supplies, no more backup plan. When a blizzard trapped him for days, strange noises echoed around the cabin at night, scraping, shuffling, low sounds he couldn't identify. Hunger and cold weakened him. Fear made every sound feel closer, every shadow more alive. He survived, but barely. The lesson was, proto-preparation is not fear, it's a respect for your own life. In Siberia, a researcher stationed in an isolated cabin began seeing shadows move where nothing existed. Exhaustion, loneliness, and endless darkness twisted his perception. The horror wasn't supernatural, it was psychological. The mind, deprived of connection, became its own enemy. He survived by grounding himself routine, reality checks, reminding himself of what was real. Sometimes the most terrifying monster lives within, and discipline is the only weapon against it. The final story belongs to a couple who stayed in a remote desert cabin. Far from roads, far from help. Late at night, someone tried the door. Slowly, carefully, over and over until sunrise. They never saw a face. They never heard a voice. Just the sound of someone testing their safety, patiently. When daylight came, the desert was empty again. They survived unharmed, but they were changed forever. Fear taught them gratitude. Survival taught them purpose. Some nights don't end when the sun rises. They live inside you, reshaping how you see the world. These chilling remote cabin horror stories are not just about what lurks in the dark. They are about what awakens within us when fear strips everything else away. They teach us that isolation reveals truth, awareness saves lives, silence warns, courage moves us forward, faith unites, preparation protects, the mind must be guarded, and survival transforms us. When the road disappears and the world forgets your name, may you remember who you are. May you listen to fear without surrendering to it. May courage rise when your hands shake, and may light find you even in the deepest woods. Watched over, strengthened, and carried safely through the night, as every shadow you face becomes a lesson rather than an ending. And every breath you take in the darkness reminds you that you were never meant to break, only to endure, to grow, and to walk forward with faith even when the cabin creaks, the forest falls silent, and the night feels endless.